evening. I'm Pat Richardson, chairing the Animal Control Advisory Board. Welcome to our meeting, July 7th, 2021. This meeting is now called to order, and we'll begin with roll call. I'd like to ask Joy to start us off, and we'll just go down the line. If everyone would introduce themselves.
Wilson, Animal Control Supervisor.
Dave Langford, retired veterinarian.
Rita Weaver, representing Farm Bureau.
Cesar Afanador, Citizens Member.
Susan Morris, St. Mary's County Health Department.
Melinda Brown, Citizen Member.
Diane Harris, Feral Cat Rescue.
Thank you. The first order of business, but before we get to that, I want to officially welcome, we do have two new members joining our board. One, Diane Harris, welcome. She is here this evening. And the other new member, Steve Tuttle, will not be able to be here this evening due to a prior commitment. I also, since this is our first full face-to-face meeting since pre-COVID, would like to welcome a member who's been on the board already for a year. We're now seeing him in person. Cesar Afanador, welcome. And with that, our first order of business is to approve minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move approve the minutes of May 5th, 2021 meeting as presented.
Is there a second?
I second it.
It's been approved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our next order of business is a shelter update. So we'd like to ask Director of Emergency Operations, Steve Walker, to come forward.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So for our new members, I'm the Director of Emergency Services, and basically my department is responsible to provide the support for this board. So that's pretty much the way it works. Of course, she's my Animal Control Supervisor, Joy, and she is a member of the board, and as you see, I'm not. But I'm here every meeting to provide updates and information as I'm able to. All right, so we're going to go through a slide that Drew Kelly had provided to us on an update of the shelter to show some of the progress. We do have a couple drone videos. They're hard to transfer, and I wanted to show them, and you will be seeing more of those. But if we'll start to go through these. So if you can see, building footers were poured, masonry installation underway, slab utility installations ongoing, and there's quite a bit more. There's walls up. I'm very, very happy about that. So hit the next one. As you can see, when you see it from the sky with a drone, it really is very dramatic. You get to see the outline. Building site elevations adjusted, subdivision plat signed by the commissioners, final building permit issued by the Land Use and Growth Management. Again, it's very dramatic as you take a look at it. Let's go to the next slide. And as you see, there's walls, and those are the beginning of the runs. And it's very nice to see that, so we're getting there. Building construction complete, July 2022, open to the public, fall of 2022, and I'll talk a little bit about the plans for opening. Okay, next one. And as you can see, they're starting to lay the pipes. Again, there's a better picture of the openings for the runs. That bottom area that you see, that foundation, is for our barn. So that's the separate building off to the right. When you see it from the sky, you can see that. Let's do the next one. Is that it?
That's all.
That's all. So he gave us a little taste. So that was from Drew. So they're moving very, very well on it. There were some difficulties. They had some soil issues, and they've ratified all that. We do go to the construction meetings every week, and Joy does most of those. And again, we do some drones, and when we do the grand opening, you'll get to see all of those drone pictures, little pieces, and we're going to get Amy to do some of that. So it's going to be very nice to watch the progression. So that's the update on that. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer that.
I'm sorry, what were the soil issues?
I'm sorry?
What were the soil issues?
So they had used that area because it's right off of the landfill to put mulch, and We think that the soil got a little bit too wet, and they had to move some around and put some in and replace it. Then they had to grade a little bit and take it down to flatten it. Didn't really take very long. I thought it would be quite a bit longer to do it, but they responded very quickly. So it really wasn't very difficult. Had me a little worried when they brought it up, but it went pretty quick. So, we're past that, and we're moving on. And as you see, they've got the foundation for the barn. So next will be, the pasture that they're going to flatten out and clear that. So, but anyway, not too bad. So.
Are there any other questions? Thank you so much for those pictures. You're bringing us to the site, even though we're not physically there, although some of us have been over there, just checking things out. But thank you so much. Do you have other information for
I do.
us?
So we were going to discuss a bit about, the shelter manager position. So where we are at this moment is that because of the budget and the way it unfolded, the funding is not there at this moment for the shelter manager. So that means that it won't be until next year. Now, one message from the commissioners that they did give is I can go back to them. I do intend to do that by January, if not sooner, and ask them to fund that so that we can begin to put the person on. If we're going to hire this person, they need to be on March, April, so that we get a good 6 months before the shelter opens. We think that the time frame for opening is going to be October or November. In the meantime, you have all provided some outstanding input on the selection process. And again, without getting into too many details to protect the integrity of it, it's going to be a pretty rigid process for the people to go through. We need to get the right people. As somebody said, they need to have some hair on them because they need to be animal lovers. Absolutely. But, for me, I really want to see some excellent leadership skills, management skills. And again, I've done some selection processes in the past. They're going to have to work for it, and I think they should. I think there's some people on this board that have excellent human resource skills that will help us in selecting it. So ultimately, the final part of this will be approved by Human Resources. No choice in the matter. That's the way it's going to have to be. But all of you are going to have a piece of that, and we'll see where it goes. Who will sit on the board? We'll see. We'll get there. But we're not prepared to get into that deep level yet. But if you got questions, I'll be glad to answer that. But trust me when I tell you, it's going to be a rigid process, and we're going to find the right person. Absolutely. So, questions? Comments?
Now, were we all going to discuss, characteristics or things that we wanted on the...
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay. Because then I'll just hold it until we discuss that.
Is now the time to do that?
Sure.
Do you have any other information that you wanted to share before we start the discussion?
I don't think so. What else did we have on? The only other thing we already talked about was the name of the animal shelter, and I think we had floated the idea of St. Mary's County Animal Care and Adoption Facility. I don't know if anybody had any other ideas on that.
We'd like to have two discussions. The first on the characteristics that
Okay.
members of this board would like to see in the animal shelter manager. And I think if we do that first, and then we would like to come back and talk a little bit about the naming of the shelter and some
Okay.
thoughts there.
So on the first one, just to keep in mind that HR will have to sign off on what we decide. And then on the second one, that's a commission decision that we will make the recommendations, and then the commission decides to vote on that, and they will adopt that name. Again, I think I mentioned this last time, if you were to try to name it after a person, that's very, very difficult. And there's some other situations. Something along these lines is probably fairly easy to pass. But there's some very specific guidelines on naming a facility. So, but I'm open for discussion, so let's go.
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for giving us, as an advisory board, the opportunity to have input into some of the characteristics, abilities, motivations that we would like to see in the person who is selected to really oversee this new shelter. And I think we all understand that our role is to provide you with thoughts, ideas, things that we feel strongly about, maybe some things that we don't feel that strongly about, and then you'll take it under consideration. And I know that the county has a clearly spelled out procedure and policy for how HR operates, how hiring goes, and all of that. So I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I'm not sure of the best way to do this discussion. I thought maybe I would begin by just asking if we have someone who wants to start us off, and others can join in, or we can go one by one, whatever the board feels is most appropriate.
I'm
So-
happy to start.
Okay.
Let me offer one thing before you start. So normally, advisory boards don't have executive sessions, but keep in mind that perhaps this is a perfect time to consider that. So we should have our discussions, but maybe some of this should be done in an executive session because, again, to protect the integrity of it. I will pursue that with the county attorney to see how we go about that, but just keep that in mind that perhaps this is a perfect opportunity for us to be able to do that. You know,
If we could just give you some generic thoughts of skills and qualities, I think that would be appropriate.
Agreed, yes.
And if you see us veering off into territory that you think is outside of that, if you just signal us. Okay, Melinda, you would like to start?
I will, and I've submitted my suggestions in writing. I know that'll become part of our administrative documents for this meeting. I guess one of the things that I would like to ensure that we do is define, because the current draft requisition that we're working from is a little incongruent as to what this position really is. Is it animal services overarching? Is it shelter? Is it animal control? Is it a combination? So I think some clarity in that is important, and then ensuring that the requisition speaks to that throughout would be important. That was one of the things I saw. I think I didn't see flavor that I would like to see tied to positive outcomes for animals. I saw a lot of from intake to euthanasia, but not a positive outcome. And I know the intent globally is for those positive outcomes. I'm not saying that's not the intent, but it's not articulated. So I think if we can get that into the documentation, it will be very important.
Okay.
And then a couple of broad stroke areas that I think are missing from what we have in a draft are things tied to marketing and promotion, social media, development of community-based programs. Obviously, you know, animal care, leadership of people are both the linchpins of this position. However, those are things that I think they're the only things that are going to lead to those positive outcomes. If we start having community-based programs and we're getting the marketing, the promotion. I know it sounds a little strange to say you're marketing animals for adoption, but that's what you're doing.
No, it doesn't sound strange at all. It sounds very nice. We, you know, and I say we, you know, me and Joy, you know, when she takes over as supervisor, I took over as director, we didn't have a Facebook page. And we do quite a bit of what you say, but to expand that a bit more and require that in the position description, maybe that's a pretty good thought. So, not bad.
Yeah, so that's really all I feel the need to share at this level if we're trying to keep the details to a minimum.
All right.
Okay. Who else would like to chime in?
I had a few things, and the ones that are more specific, I'll keep for later. But I see on the education, you have degree in animal sciences. You don't state whether that's an associate, bachelor's, master's. And honestly, my thought would be to have a bachelor's in a relevant field. So whether they have, let's say, a bachelor's in leadership and management, because that's not, it says public administration, but I'm kind of thinking generally, you know, something like that. And then they have experience at another shelter, but they have the leadership and management degree. So I think it needs to be more clear what type, as far as like the degree, is it an associate's, is it a bachelor's?
I think a bachelor's is appropriate, but I think that, we'll have some more discussion on that. So my thoughts are very much in line with yours. So I think that we'll, when we get to there, I think that, again, I think you guys will be happy with what we do. So, and certainly, we're going to come back and have some more discussion on this, but I would agree. I think leadership and management is critical. And again, you've got to have, it's an excellent point, you've got to have the love of animals, to be honest with you. You've got to have that. But again, I think college is important. I mean, it gives you the ability to have critical thinking, planning, all of the skills that you're going to gain from that. So, and then you got to have life experiences. So I think that's pretty fair.
Right, so I think maybe when you're writing up the job description, or, when you're putting a bid out for people, to clarify that instead of just saying a degree. The other thing that I think that is really important is a basic understanding of the budget process. They don't have to have an degree in accounting or something like that. It's just that they need to have the basic understanding and how to manage the money that is coming in.
Agreed.
So, okay, those are my general things. I have some more specific, which I'll.
I just would add that attached to understanding of budgeting, I think probably also knowledge of fundraising.
Yes.
And I think all of us will end up talking about seeking grants that will all become a part of the budget.
Yes. Fundraising is very critical in this. As we've discussed before, I know when Dream was on, she talked extensively about that, and they need to know how to do fundraising. So.
Okay.
I kind of share all these thoughts that have been expressed, and we've discussed that before. My question is, I wonder if the commissioners realize how pivotal this position is, because
So I will make sure
it'll make or break the thing if you don't have a dynamic. I think you understand it, because in your role, I imagine that you have to deal with the public a lot and all this other stuff. And so this position is so critical that they get the right person. And so that's my question. Do the commissioners get that, I think, is my question.
I would say they're going to rely on my department to provide that information and make sure that, that's done in the right way. With all of your help, we'll do that. So I don't have any great concern that won't happen. I think that we're going to get there. I think that there's too many good people on this board for us to fail. So, but I think that's kind of my job. That's kind of our job, to make sure, that we do the right thing for the commissioners. I think that's what's important. So, they'll make the right decision with the right information.
Do we have other comments? I think I would like to maybe capture some of the broader, more generic qualities. And I think the one that I really always focus on is, at a minimum, you have to have managerial skills. You have to be able to control the environment and get the tasks done and follow the work that's required. But I would hope that we see someone who can go above and beyond managerial skills and have leadership. And I would start with vision. This is brand new. This is the golden opportunity for a passionate lover of animals in a beautiful county. It will be a beautiful facility. So I really would hope that we see someone who has a vision and the ability to inspire others to kind of follow that vision and take it all the way through. I think things like the ability to build relationships, St. Mary's County is known for the community working together. I mean, I came here in 1972, and that was one of the hallmarks, and it has continued to be just a very important descriptor of St. Mary's County. So I think there will be plenty of people who want to be a part of this, and it almost gets back to the social media and the marketing to make sure that people know that there's an opportunity. And so I would hope that we find a person who can capture that and help motivate not only staff members, but volunteers to participate in that way. I came up with a list, and then I had to remind myself that I wasn't thinking about selecting a principal for an elementary school, but there are certainly some similarities in terms of what I was hoping we might see. The leadership being at the top, of course, the HR skills, the ability to work with people. And today, it's really about networking and working together with groups, listening to input from all sources that have a stake, and the ability to resolve disputes, because inevitably there will be things that people disagree about. So my hope is that we find someone who has that level of HR skills. I think all the communication skills are going to be extremely important. The written communication, grant writing is one, but this person will be doing marketing, will be doing public announcements, will be the go-to person that the reporters will be seeking out, and really will have to know how to think on their feet and have the background knowledge to be able to respond, the knowledge of county government, county policies and procedures. And I always, in the past, when I've been responsible for hiring, I always was interested in the question of, did this person actually do homework on St. Mary's County before they came to the interview? So I would be looking for not just a great person, but someone who specifically knows about St. Mary's County and some of the standard operating procedures. And Melissa, or Melinda, I think you have that on your list, that they have knowledge of the ordinances and the procedures for shelters in Maryland and in St. Mary's County, and that they are able to talk about some of the needs of St. Mary's in particular. This is really the first time we would have our own shelter, and so I think that's important. The oral communication, just as important. They need to be able to do formal presentations. They may be asked by county commissioners to do formal presentations or community groups as part of the marketing initiative. And I think in the area of technology, facility with not only basic software programs, but also budgeting, the more creative programs that are available, because I think we've had, when Dave and I visited Calvert County's Linda Kelly shelter, one of the thoughts we talked about was, when your goal is successful adoptions, you not only have to prepare the animals to be adopted, but you have to offer some support to the potential adoptees, because the dog that you see in the shelter is not necessarily the same one that when you get him or her home that you see there. Their behavior may be different, and you need someone to call. You need some resources, whether they're through technology or whether there are people that are prepared to help with that. I happened to visit the Worcester County Animal Shelter, and one of the strongest points of their shelter was they have resources that if someone does get that animal home and the animal is not behaving the way they saw it when they agreed on the adoption, that they have a person who will talk with them on the phone, provide resources, even make a home visit if that's necessary, to help make sure that the animal gets adjusted properly and the adoptive parents feel that they have someone to turn to, because what we don't want to see are returns. We don't want people getting frustrated the first day or two and then feeling like this was a mistake and I need to end it. So I know this is asking a lot of an individual, but I think we should go for the most that we can find, and I know you agree.
Absolutely.
We've got to get the best that we can. And so, again, I thank you for giving us a chance to weigh in as board members, and I'm sure that as time goes on, you'll be hearing more from each of us probably, as far as the kinds of things that we really are hoping to see in the hiring of an individual.
Yes.
Does anyone else want to add anything or have questions on this topic?
I have one more thing I would like to add. The person needs to be able to see the big overall picture. Where are we heading with this and what is the mission? But at the same time, be able to pay attention to detail and to get the small things done, because the small things add up in a positive way.
Vision with focus.
Right.
Any surprises yet?
No, there really aren't, and it's very nice to hear. I think that, you're pretty much where I am and where I want to go. This position is, you got to think about that all of my personnel are in my building with the exception of a few of the radio guys. And in this scenario, while it's going to be answering to me, it's going to be their own independent building, and they're going to be out functioning very independently. They'll be making reports to me, and there's a lot of things they'll have to run, but it's got to be an independent place. This person has to be able to do that. Everything all of you have described, they've got to be able to do that. And then coming in, they're going to have to demonstrate they can do that before they can, get that position. So, but more work to come. So we have a little bit of time. We can't wait too long, but we have a little bit of time. So, it's
Okay.
good news.
When do you anticipate advertising for the position?
So I have to go back to the commissioners and ask them to provide the funding. I think I'm going to try to do that in October. If that occurs, I can see as maybe advertising in November. As soon as they can approve the funding, or do approve the funding, then we can advertise. I'd like to have, everything prepared before then so that we're pretty much ready to go. So we'll be doing some work. I am a bit busy with the EMS because that's grown exponentially in the county, but this is important, and it's going to come before we know it, so it's got to get done. So,
Will this board have any additional input or see revisions to the requisition at all?
so I think once we do the actual job write-up, the description, I think you guys should take a look at that. Okay, I think that's obviously fair, but also important that you do that. When we do the announcement, we could show you that, but it really won't have, that's taken right off of the, personnel description. So, but I think once we get there, I think you guys should take a look at that. I think that's fair. Again, my only caution is not trying to be secretive, but you don't want to give one person an unfair advantage. This really needs to be an unbiased approach. Personally, I like to have a board that when people walk in, they don't know anybody on the board. And we'll see how that goes. Sometimes that's inevitable that somebody in the community that's trying for it. But again, I want a very unbiased approach. I want it very objective, and I think that's important. And of course, we know that HR certainly wants that above all else. But I do think that once we get it written, I could tell you could have it written in a week. Except I've got a lot on my plate, so we'll get it done as quick as I can do it, and I'll probably be doing most of the writing because that's what the department head does. But again, you guys have given me a lot of information that's going to help. So
The only reason I bring that up is tied to your timeline. Our next meeting is September.
So if I have it for you then we're ready, aren't we?
Absolutely. After that, it would be November. So
Yeah.
that was my point.
Yeah. Well, so if we get it done in September, what we agree on it, and then I take it to HR and then they agree on it, then in November, it's just telling you we're doing it, because we've already gotten there, so. But like I said, we'll see how this all works out. So I think that we can get there, but very good information. And again, I think we're all pretty much in line with what we need to do. So it's got to be a really good person. It has to be somebody that really can do all of these things. May seem impossible, but it's not. So we can get there. So.
Did anyone else have a comment or?
I couldn't recall if there was discussion of an assistant manager. I know that person is the one we interfaced with in Calvert, and that person helps the manager a great deal.
So the next in line currently in the structure is a shelter supervisor. So that would be an assistant, but it's not that title. Qualifications are going to be stringent, but not quite as much. So certainly they're going to need supervisory skills, leadership to some degree, not quite as much. But that's not even going to occur until next year's budget, so we got a bit more time. And it would be nice to have the shelter manager helping to devise the job description for that. So I think
Sure.
that would be important to do. So, but that's the next. Will we have an assistant eventually? I don't know when title will occur. It's tied to dollars, and that's the commissioners that have to approve that. So, but yeah, that's next in line. But again, that comes in with the rest of the employees. So that's the plan. Shelter manager comes in and says they need them sooner. Okay, we go back to commissioners. This is all building out, you know that. This is a new thing for all of us, so it's going to be interesting the way it plays out. So,
And I think we've said before, we won't actually know until we're open
true.
what the client load is going to be. And it will take some time, I think, for word to get out that we have this shelter.
It will, but it's in a really good location right in the middle of that community. So I think it's going to get out a lot quicker than you think. People see it. They know it's being built. So
Yes.
we'll see, but I think it's going to be successful a lot quicker than we think.
I think you need to be prepared for a rapid influx.
And that data would support
Yes,
an additional person or persons.
yes.
Okay. The second discussion item was the possible name of the shelter. Did you want to tell us again what you had proposed or suggested? I know you're,
I think it was fairly generic, but I think I'm hoping it's representative of what we hope to do. St. Mary's County Animal Care and Adoption Facility. Yeah, it's a shelter per se, but we think it's much more than that. So, and Joy, you want to talk about that?
I was leaning a lot towards having that animal services end of it in it, to know that we're a resource to the community, not just the animal control or the adoption side. We're going to be a resource. So having the animal services side of it, we spoke with some of the ACOs. We tried to get some of their opinions so we could start throwing names out so everybody had key words to work off of. And the big ones that kept coming up was, adoption center. We wanted to make sure that that was part of it because we do not want the word shelter in our title. So, for me, it's animal services, animal care, one or the other, and adoption center. So picking some keywords where people feel welcome is more important to me and more important to all of us that are trying to make this decision than them saying shelter, pound. These are words that in my profession are cringing, so, yeah.
and I think we've talked a lot about the paradigm shift, that we are really looking at a very different purpose.
Yes.
And so the title should reflect that.
Yeah, and that's the image that we want to portray. We want to portray this positive image that draws more people in. So, and if we don't have shelter in our name, we think that the chances are a lot better that they're going to perceive it in a much better fashion. So,
And I'm not set on this name. This is a suggestion, so if we come up with a better one, we come up with a better one.
There's
So we
some-
do have some time to work on this.
There's another thing we could do along the lines of the name, but also have a very strong mission statement. And perhaps with the mission statement would be something along the lines of the importance of the human-animal bond, or the fact that without the people, the animals need the people to really thrive, and that Melinda touched on that. Something along those lines, that can make the name even more, effective, and can kind of go along with it.
I think that'd be a great committee to work on a mission statement.
Something simple but strong.
Simple and short. You know,
Short,
that's important.
simple.
Mission statements, you tend to get lost in them when they
Tend
get
to.
too long.
Too long.
But if you form a committee, I want to work with you on that, because I have some strong feelings about the way mission statements, some of them just go on and they get really deep. People don't read them. So, but I think that's an important part of it. But that can certainly help with a name suggestion. I'm sorry.
So, no, you're fine. So I just following on, you had alluded to what I had suggested. So in my write-up that I had submitted, I had suggested adopt St. Mary's and using that as the term. And the reason I was suggesting that kind of as an acronym is because I think if we name this anything like care and control or anything like that facility,
Yep.
nobody's going to say that. That's a very administrative description of a facility. And so it's going to become the shelter, or it's going to become the pound. TCAS has had a name for a long time.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's the pound. So I think if we go with any type of generic administrative style name, that's where we're going to end up. So I think if we can come up with something, whether it's my suggestion or not, that speaks to our mission, but it's catchy. So I had suggested adopt St. Mary's, with having adopt stand for something. And I gave a couple of suggestions. There's one I prefer that leads towards that kind of mission-driven organization, which is animals depend on people to thrive. So adopt. And I think whether it's that or something else, I think we need something. Those are the shelters that I think people start referring to them in that way instead of saying shelter, pound.
I also want to share, Melissa Carnes was not able to be with us tonight, but she did send me some thoughts that she had when we talked at the last meeting about the possible name. She did raise a concern about the word care in the name. And she feels that with the absence of a clinic and a full-time veterinarian, that is going to misconvey what the shelter really is offering.
That's true.
And she spoke a little bit about in her rescue work, that she sees the impact of the lack of care and the absence of vet care being the most significant consequence to the animals we save. So she feels that the adoption center, that part of it, is reflective of the anticipated services at this time. I wanted to share that, and I told her I would. I have permission to do that. But I also am picking up on what Joyce said about services and remembering that we have animal control in that building. So, I think that may figure into it as well. But the primary focus is adoption, so that has to be what you see first and foremost. And I also like the idea of having an acronym, because those tend to stick more than a generic name. So I think that's something to be considered. Are there other comments or questions?
I really do like I guess you would say like a slogan that Melinda came up with, because it's something that is easy to remember. And then we can maybe, like the other parts with the service, adoption, or the care, could be part of the mission statement. But we need something that is going to be catchy and that people will remember it.
And may I say something on the care part of it? I don't want the public to think that that would just be veterinary care. They've got to know that the staff that's going to be in that shelter, they're devoted and dedicated to the care of those animals. That's why they come in there every single day. That's why they miss lunches. That's why they work late, is because they're caring for animals. So it's not just from a veterinary point of view. So a mission statement, I agree.
Yeah.
You know, from a mission statement point of view, and I mean, I do like the acronyms also. I do think they do catch on if you look at something nationwide from an acronym point of view.
So Melissa makes a fair argument, and it really is, about the care. But what Joy, and we haven't discussed this, but that really is my thought. Care is not just medical care. It is the care of the animals as they come in. I'm not set on a name. If yours is great, but I would suggest, and you certainly as a board can do what you want, but I would suggest, we know the Open Meetings Act, so you have some one-on-one discussions and kind of come up with an idea. Maybe come back in September with some suggestions, and then make a motion and take it to the commissioners. So if you come up with a good name, I'm not going to oppose you.
Well, I think it's a matter of, what you're providing, and it is care. But how does the community
Agreed.
interpret it?
Agreed.
And the only way to know that is to test it out on some of the people. So asking people, if you hear this, what do you think happens there? Or what do you think?
You could also do a survey in the community, see what people want to come up with. But again, that could take a long time. But again, the point is, let's do something that's really going to convey a good message to the public. Whatever that is, I'm okay with it.
And I agree with Dave that a strong mission statement
Agreed.
will pretty much present the name to us, because it should tie completely together. So we have our summer reading assignments.
So in following that up, because sometimes from meeting to meeting, I don't feel like we're clear on what we're
Okay.
doing. So in following that up, is our goal to present verbally to the board at the next meeting and then vote on a name? Or are we putting something into the agenda with a list of names? Are we submitting in advance? Just a plan for how we're going to get there so we can actually make some decisions at the next meeting.
What would be your timeline for the name?
I would think we would need something by January or February.
Okay.
As we're starting to go, over the hump, the first of the year, starting heading down, because we're going to start to make plans for the grand opening sometime in the spring, and we would need to have it by that time. So you've got some time.
Who's going to actually pick the name?
The commissioners. That is their decision. They're going to go on our recommendations. We could certainly give them a couple of options, but the more difficult you make it, the more difficult it will be for them to do it. So I suggest, collectively you come in with, and I could include myself in this, we collectively come in with a very good name and explain why. They're going to love it, because
So
it's.
not St. Mary's Animal House?
No. No, let's just do something that really is conveying a very good message to the community. Short, that's fine. Again, I don't have a preference other than, you talk about animal control. Well, we may get around to taking that name away too from our animal control officers. But that's something that's not a high priority. We know this building has a defined date when it's going to be finished. So now we need to start planning on when we're going to do that defined opening date. And then we need to be ready for it. So, but yeah, I would just work on it a little bit and come up with something good.
So if we say in November, we'll be ready to vote on a name to recommend, that gives you enough time.
So if you do it in November and then I get it to the commissioners, it'll be probably in December, early January for a naming. I still think we're in good shape. If by February we had a name, I think we would be in good shape. So
Okay.
even later would be fine, but it'd be nice to have it done by that time. So
Okay.
So should we present them to each other at the next board meeting or send them in advance in some way?
I'm concerned about the open meetings law and how much or how little we are able to do outside of the meeting.
So you talk to you, and then you talk to you individually. That's not Open Meetings Act violations.
Okay.
That's one way to do that. You can form a committee, but then you've got to follow the Open Meetings Act. Maybe that's a good idea to do it that way, but you still have to make sure you're following that Open Meetings Act in your committees. But I think there's ways to do it. If you send out an email and it's not for discussion, but then somebody responds, then you've violated it, so. I think there's ways to get it done, so.
If we verbally present them during our topic discussion at the next meeting, and then collectively take that away and come back and vote in November.
That we could do.
Yes.
Yes, that we could do.
You
So it's
do-
almost like the discussion part 2.
Right.
Yep, yes.
So
Yes.
we can't communicate by a mass email with each other
No,
to brainstorm?
unfortunately, that's the Open Meetings Act.
We spent 4 months working on this when we first got together. A reopened open meeting.
So you're not the only one that has voiced that concern, but it is Maryland law, it is St. Mary's County law. So that's the concern.
Only 3 of us can talk at any given time outside of this meeting.
Okay.
But there's ways to make it work, okay, there is. So don't be overly concerned. You can get it done.
Okay?
And besides the Human Resource Department, who will be at the interview to interview the person who's,
Can't tell you that.
okay.
I don't release it because we don't want anybody trying to influence it. So that'll be at the last minute, okay? Because if they know that you're on there and you're on there, and then people that are watching tonight go to you and try to influence it. So we don't try to release that until like right before it. So it's to protect the integrity of the system.
How many
of the
people
process.
from the Human Resource Department will be there? I mean,
We'll
is that?
see.
So
It's normally an odd number, either 3 or 5. 5's a bit cumbersome, 3 is a good number. So, traditionally it might be 1 from HR.
And then one person from this board?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would-
Will a county commissioner be there?
No,
No? Okay.
Someone from your organization, most likely.
it will be me.
Okay. Yeah.
So that absolutely will be me. So they're going to work for me.
So you and someone from here and someone from Human Resources?
That's likely, could be a couple more, depending on where this goes.
Okay.
There's some excellent experience out there in shelters, but let's just see how it goes. I can't give you a definitive answer on how that'll be. We'll develop that as we get further along, so. But that's that's a normal process, very similar to what I described, so. But we'll see. And I don't mean to be cagey. I just really want to protect it and be very objective and make sure that we do this. Whoever gets this needs to work for it and get it honestly. And let's make sure that happens, so.
I don't feel like you're being cagey. I just don't know the process. And if we're an animal advisory board, are there times when we can bring up issues that we see in the community that we want to, who goes to the county commissioners and says, we're hoping these things will be changed, or?
Do you want me to respond?
Yeah, I'll do the first part, you do the second part. Typically, when an agenda goes out, it's a draft, and I ask if there are other items that anyone would like to see on the agenda
For next time in 2 months?
for the next meeting.
I see, okay.
And if, we have if those items are doable for the next meeting, then we would put them on. I think what's difficult for all of us is we can't have discussions as a group, or even half the people, outside of a formal meeting under open meetings law. But we can talk with each other, and sometimes, we're able to do that, and it clarifies something. So I would suggest, and I don't know if, you are willing to do this, but I think if there are some items or issues that you have concerns about, if you let me know or you let Steve know, and there would be cases where I would need to defer, of course, to Steve because he's the official staff person. I'm not.
Okay.
So what you would do is if you have an issue that you want on the agenda, you get to know this lady right here. Okay, she will be putting it on the agenda. She'll be sending you messages saying, do you have anything that wants to be on there? That's the other one, Angel.
What are your names?
This is Mary Ann Gardner,
Okay.
right? And this is Angel Clem. And they are my staff members, right?
Okay.
And I say that, but they keep me straight, so. But anyway, so she's the one that does it. She does it. We have another that is on vacation, Darlene. All three of them work on this, and we call it board docs because that's the system we put it in. So you would notify them. You should probably go through the chairperson, and then she would send it to us. But I imagine if you sent it to both, then you could do it that way. So then it would come before here. Traditionally, it would come up before the board, and then if a motion's made and it's approved, then usually the motion is to send a letter to the commissioners to consider something, and then it goes back to her, and then we get it to the commissioners by usually the next morning. And then it will come up for their next meeting, and then they decide.
Okay.
Sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes they'll respond quickly, sometimes they don't. But they're the elected officials, and this board is, an extension of them. It truly is, as I am, right? We all work for them. So they make that decision representing the public. But I don't think it's unusual to bring up issues if you want to, and
I understand there's subcommittees. Should I talk to someone after the meeting?
We technically started with 4 subcommittees. Bylaws and ordinances, we decided we were small enough that we could handle that as a full board. And with ordinances in particular, we feel that we need to wait for the new shelter manager to come on board in order to do a review of the current ordinances and see what needs to be changed, if anything, what needs to be added, eliminated, because that's the person who's going to have to oversee and enforce in that role.
I would think Joy would be that person, and she's here now.
This
Not
person
quite.
that y'all are talking about hiring will be my boss.
Right. So the structure
The
is,
director of the shelter will be your boss?
yes.
My boss, yes.
Okay.
So currently, Joy responds to the emergency manager, Gerald Gardner. That's going to change when we hire a shelter manager. So the
Okay.
structure is, and perhaps next time I should bring a flow chart for the new members and show that, but shelter manager, so you have me at the top, and I have a number of division managers, and one of them is a shelter manager. Below that is a flow chart with all the different positions. Again, she's an offshoot, animal control comes under that, and then the supervisor, shelter supervisor, and then, I don't remember all the titles, but there's a bunch of different titles. There's about 12, which is not enough, but we'll get to that later on. We're hoping that there are a number of volunteers that will help, fill some of the needs of the shelter. But we're starting from the ground up. The shelter manager's got to write policy for the shelter. So, and we've got policies from other shelters, but that person really needs to be the leader in that facility. So,
We have,
complicated.
So we'll be waiting until March till that person's hired to work on any kind of animal ordinance changes or whatever?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Even if they're not shelter-related, we need to wait? If they're
No, you can certainly suggest something to the commissioners at any time, and and what they will do, they'll send it to, after you guys make a recommendation, they'll send it to the county attorney, and then it will looked at and considered, and then they'll either decide to pass it or not. So,
Okay.
we have 2 other subcommittees. One has been the shelter, the new shelter, and most of the work that was chaired and continues to be chaired by Rita. A lot of the work on that, most of it really was going through from the very beginning with the schematics and meeting with Public Works and making some decisions about, what things need to be changed or moved or so forth. Even location came up in the very beginning. So that has really consumed an enormous amount of time. That was the main focus. We have a fourth committee, which is Public Education and Outreach, and Dave is chairing that, and that committee will now come into play because that has to do with helping us get the word out that this is coming, make some connections with the rescue groups in the Tri-County area, especially in the county, and try to, even private partnerships with, because of where it's going to be located, it is fairly close to some of the businesses that may want to participate. So that committee now will really have more work to do. There'll be more focus on that.
So there was a shelter committee, there's a public education and outreach committee, and
And then there was bylaws.
that you're putting aside until,
If something were to come up with bylaws that needed to be changed, we would bring it to the board as a whole.
okay.
So we have bylaws, and we need to make sure, Mary Ann, maybe you could make a note to send her, so we'll send it
Of
to.
the
yeah.
bylaws? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Please.
bylaws are approved also by the commissioners
Okay.
for any changes. So,
Okay, thanks.
I have a quick go back. Procedurally, it's my understanding that if the advisory has an issue, it comes to the floor via the agenda, and that's where we record that that item is going to be discussed. It's something that some of the board members are having issues with. So as the advisory board, we can provide the information out for resolution if it has to go
yes.
forward.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure, because I was a little concerned that we're going out directly to the other organizations without having a
Starting here.
consensus that that's the protocol.
So the first step is, when I send the draft agenda out, then and I ask if there are items that people would like to see included. And that would be the first time I would be notified that there are other items that people are interested in. And then typically they would go on the agenda. The person who is requesting that item would be asked to do a couple of pages of background exhibits. And because as you can see on board docs, every item has either a memo or support material if you need background reading or something like that. And then we would go through that in our normal board meeting. We meet every other month. We do have an option to call a special meeting if we have an urgent need to do that. We have exercised that before.
So we tell you, not Mary Ann and Angel, or
If you start with me, then I'm going to go to
tell
them.
Okay,
And ultimately, Mary Ann and I work closely together to get the agenda
okay.
set and ready for board docs, so that can then open up. And it opens up first to you all, and then it becomes public, and the public can access it as well.
Well, thank you for the clarification.
Okay?
The other question I have, well, it's more a statement. I believe there is a staffing plan from the commissioner's side or from the county side of the house. Is there a visual, an organization chart or something that tells us what the composition is and the
Yes.
nature of their,
So have you been at the board docs? It is in
Yes,
the
I
board.
have.
So it is in there. It was in January of last year. But if you can't find it, you can call me. I'll help you find it. I can send it to you. But that was a staffing study. Remember that we had presented. We made a couple minor changes, nothing substantial. I think one was we cut down one position that was like a transport, a couple others. But either way, we could talk about it if you want, and I can show it to you, but yes, there
Yeah,
is.
it prompted the question, something that you said, that there was an assistant, and I don't recall seeing.
No, there wasn't. No, it's.
So my point is it possible to have that version updated and provided to the board?
So I could provide it again, but nothing's changed. So the
Okay.
assistant was never in the plan. The next in line was a shelter supervisor, in essence serves as an assistant, but that's not the title. So there really was not one. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name that presented, but you can take a look at that.
It
And
was
again,
It was Frank and Associates. The
That's it.
county commissioners commissioned a company, Frank and Associates Incorporated, to do a staffing study on the animal shelter. And that actually was done before this board even came into being. And so that will not change. It's already now several years old. And so now it's up to Mr. Walker and his staff to continue to review and determine if other positions are needed or there are positions that are not needed.
And that was my point, really.
Okay.
And my point was, if anything has changed from their standpoint, I saw the study and I read it. So I'm just trying to see, because any position that,
I'll send you all the update.
any position
And it-
has to be funded, and that there is a fund that has to be allocated for it, and that has to be budgeted ahead of time. And he knows that.
So-
Thank you.
So it was the budget process we just went through, and that was why, so there was some money that was going to be approved in this budget. It was a very difficult budget, but because we know there's amount of time before the shelter actually opens, so the funding was pushed off to next year, with the message to me from the commissioners that if I want to go back and ask for the shelter manager mid-year, I can do that. There are minute changes. That study was really a great base of information for us to start from. So it was very, very helpful. Again, been some slight changes. There will be more. One thing you said is we won't know until we really open for 6 months or a year. We will be making more changes when we start collecting data and as we see the growth that undoubtedly is going to occur. But that was important as the base. That started us. That gave us the general, this guy was a consultant that is very good skills in human resources, but that was a great start for us. But that's where we started, so you got, okay.
I have a comment. I don't know if this board was ever provided, this study just happened last year, so this was after we were formed as a board, but there was a study done prior to this board forming that was more all-encompassing. It wasn't just a staffing study, which was kind of the baseline of where we started for the shelter planning. I think it predated this advisory board, but it kind of led to the development of this advisory board. And I don't know if that study has ever been shared with this board, but it's valuable information from like starting at point A. And then it was very pie in the sky. I mean, mind you, there was no budget tied to it. It probably would have cost us $150 million to build that shelter and staff it. And I'm just being very, exaggerating here. But I think it may help you understand what that company kind of said. This would be everything you would ever possibly need for a shelter of any size. And then this study narrowed that down to say, for a shelter your size of what you're now saying you plan to do, this is our recommendation. So there was a difference there.
Right.
So that may help you.
The shelter study was the start of this whole project, and it was before I started work, so it's been about 5 years. And I had a copy I still have a copy of it, and I can share that. So you're correct. The staffing portion of that was minuscule. So I actually went to the commissioners and asked them to commission this study, right? Because I wanted a more drilled down scope and look at what we really needed for staffing. And that's what this is. So first the shelter study, which is very high reaching, high overarching. And we did some of the programming, remember, and based on that. And then the staffing study. And then we've made some very minor modifications since then. And as you said, it's got to be funded. And that was the process we just went through in the budget, which we will again every year. And again, as we start to develop more data about how it really works, we'll make more changes. as it grows, because I think it will. So I think that the study said we needed about 20 people to run it, which about 16 to 18 of those were volunteer. I think that was part of that discussion. And of course, we were worried about what we're going to have to fund, $1. So that was how we ended up with the 12 positions that are funded at this time. But again, I don't think that that's going to hold once we really get up and running and be effective. But it'll get us going, and we'll run it with 12 people and whatever volunteers we can garner. So,
Thank you.
yeah, good question.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Walker?
You said that they were doing drone footage, but we didn't have anything for tonight. Is there somewhere that we can go on the website to see updates on?
I'm trying to think about a way that I can easily distribute that to you, so give me a little bit of time. I'm trying to work on it. We have three videos now. They're each about 3 or 4 minutes. Great footage. But let me think of a way to get that done.
Okay,
Let me
we
work on
have
it.
free time. We had,
Yeah.
that it would be nice to be able to see the progress that they've made.
So the intent is to get it to you, and I haven't figured out an easy way to do that without incurring additional costs, so.
Put it on Facebook.
It's pretty neat stuff. It really is incredible. We have a young man that really enjoys doing, drone work, and it's his own drone, and he's volunteered to allow us to do it, so. But I will get there, so we'll try to
Thank you.
get it in the next week or two, so.
Pat, can you explain for Diane and Cesar about board member time? So outside of actual agenda items.
You must have read my mind.
So, am I done?
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Before you leave, can I just say, I just heard Melinda say, and this is a really good idea, what about creating some sort of Facebook page now for that, the shelter, and showing interest for the community to see it progressing? I don't know if you can do that if you don't have a
Okay.
name for it. Maybe we
Well,
need to do the naming sooner, but
Well, so we can just say St. Mary's County Animal Shelter. Maybe that's not the best, but that's what the public knows it by right now. And I think that me and Joy will work on developing a page off of our Facebook page.
yeah. In your spare
well,
time at 3 o'clock in the
so-
morning. Basically,
Exactly.
yes.
So we will both do it together, because the Facebook page for emergency services, I actually worked on and got that up and running, so that we will collectively work on this together. So we've also got some very good young talent in her office, animal control officers that will help. And, but that's a great idea. And
But
then,
if there's things that
Please.
you can email too,
so
I can share it on Feral Cat Rescue's Facebook page too. Look, we're getting a new shelter, isn't this exciting? That kind of stuff. I mean, you want interest in
So
that.
the email capacity for the county is limited,
Okay.
because I've tried to because I was going to email all them to you, and I can't get it through.
They're
so-
difficult
but-
to email.
They are, but the Facebook is a great idea, so we're going to work on that. So I will talk to the PIO and make sure we're good with it, and we'll start. That's a great idea.
That was
I like it.
Melinda's, really. We have to give
I love it, so.
credit where credit is due.
Thank you.
Thank you. We had added at the very beginning board member time, and that is just an opportunity at the end of our meetings, close to the end of our meetings, and right before public comment, that any of the board members who have any information that they want to share can feel free to do that. Sometimes everyone has something, sometimes no one has anything. You're not under any obligation to use that, but the option is there if you have something that you want to share. So I just typically ask, do any of the board members have any information they want to share?
I have a very brief comment, and I don't know the people's names off the top of my head, but Joy's aware that I found myself in a situation a couple weeks ago with what I believe is a kitten in the dumpster down at the Valley Lee transfer station. So I took up quite a bit of time of the Public Works and the Sheriff's Department and Animal Control because I got into the dumpster looking for the kitten. So I want to thank everybody involved with trying to assist me in my moment of crazy. And sadly, we did not find the kitten, but we tried our best. So thank you.
I found an opossum in the St. Inigo's dumpster, and they wouldn't, and John came down,
Yeah.
and the person in charge of the dumpster wouldn't let us get in.
He didn't let me get in, I jumped in, so he,
Yeah. Well, somebody else jumped in and made him get out.
well, he wasn't going to touch me, so. Everybody was very accommodating, but understanding that it was against advice to be in the dumpster.
Yeah.
And if we need to, we can call on members of Joy's staff to come and do an in-service for us or a presentation
Yes, ma'am.
and help us understand, because sometimes members of the board are getting calls from people. And I think some of us are easy to reach, and so, just something to think about.
Yep, every one of us will come out.
We all
Linda
know,
knows this.
we all know people, and it's, okay. We do have one person here to speak to public comment. Nope, okay, that's been canceled. So at this time, we need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I thought you were going to tell Cesar and I something before you adjourn the meeting.
About public comment.
That was about the board member time.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
got it.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, we need a second.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. And thank you all for your time this evening and for the work that you do.